quick animations. I'm going to open up the one I had last time. Sure. And Blips. And this is what we did last time. Okay, we did these things. We did those ones. We did that. That one. Okay. And these are all just the same kind of thing, just that same pattern that we did before. But instead of wiping a solid across our page, we're using a shape and just expanding a shape, just scaling it up. That's all that is in this case. Or in this case, I've scaled this up. So this is practice stuff. This is just getting us ready for the actual assignment. Okay. The actual assignment is you're going to do 3 of these things. Okay. You're going to create a little animation, and then you're going to add a blippy effect to it. All right. So in this case, my little animation is this ball bouncing. All right. So we'll walk through that in a second. But what enhances this ball hitting the wall and hitting the ground are these little blips that can just add a little bit more excitement to it. Because right now, even though it's an awesome animation, it's still pretty boring. Okay. And we can enhance it by adding little blips or adding little effects or something else to it to just make it feel a little bit more interesting inside here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new composition, and I'm going to call this bouncy ball. I should call it 2 because I already have 1. 1920 by 1080, that's the same settings we've already used. My duration can now be probably about 5 seconds. That's probably more than enough. All right, and I'm going to start with just a shape. So I'm going to go to my ellipse tool and double click. That creates an ellipse. And then I'm going to go into my ellipse settings, and I'm going to change my size here. I think 200 and 200 was a good size. All right. All right. So now I'm just going to animate the position. Now, as people who have very limited resources animating, for some of you, this may be the only time you've ever animated. So we're in the 4th week of classes already, I think. So not much animation. So I don't want you to try to get this perfect right away, okay? I've been animating for years, and I've still played with it, okay? I'm not going to get it perfect the first time. So I'm going to animate this ball flying across the screen, hitting here, and going boing, 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 and then going a little bit further, okay? So I'm going to start it off screen, and I'm going to set a position keyframe. I'm just going to go up to some arbitrary number. I'm going up to 1 second. You obviously need time for all this to transition, so I don't want to go up 1 frame because that's not enough time, so I go up to 1 second, and then I set my next frame. What do I want the ball to do? I want the ball to fly across the screen and hit here, okay? Then I'm going to go down to, let's say, 115, because obviously this is a big stretch. 115, I want the ball to hit the ground. And then at 2 seconds, I want the ball to bounce here. And then at 2:15, I want the ball to bounce here. Then at 3, I want the ball to bounce here. And then at 3:15, I want the ball to bounce there. Okay? So there's my path. Now what I didn't do is I did not set the bounce heights, right? At no point did I set how high the ball is bouncing. It just goes from here to there, swings around, it hits this, and then it goes boop, 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 and boop. Okay? So at no point did I set the heights on this. But what we can do inside of After Effects is just like we would do inside of Illustrator or Photoshop or InDesign, is we can use the pen tool to actually modify what the path of the ball is doing, right? So if we look at this, this is actually just like a pen tool Bezier. That's all it is. So if we look here, do you think that the ball rounding before it hits the wall is effective? No. No, it should hit the wall, right? It should hit the wall and bounce off. So I don't need a curvy line here. I need a pointy line to get that across. So I hit G to get to my pen tool, which is right there. I Alt-click on this, and you'll see that that point now becomes a pointy point. And so as I go back and hit it, now it feels like it's actually hitting the wall and bouncing off of it. Okay, just with that single click, I've improved this animation a whole lot. Now, as it comes across like this, and even though I have all of these things set, I never work in a let's do everything at the same time. I focus in on these little parts and then I build up to eventually blend everything together. So from here to here, I don't really think a ball would shoot straight. Remember, one of those principles of animation was arches or arcs? So we should have the ball kind of like arc into that bounce. So the same thing, if you look, there's a little handlebar right here. As long as I'm in the pen tool, I can arc this up. And so now what should happen is that the ball should fly upward and then hit that side. Okay? So I'm going to look at this for each one of these. So I'm going to click back on the ball. And as it comes up, now it's going to hit the ground. Now each time it hits the ground, there should be a bounce there. So it shouldn't have a nice smooth transition going into it. So I'm going to Alt-click on this one, and then I'm going to start dragging. So I didn't just click, I Alt-clicked and dragged so that I could pull this handlebar out. So now if we look at this, you'll see that we have a bump. So it's going to come down here and hit, and that's going to go up this hill. And there's another handlebar here. I can drag that up too. I'm going to Alt-click on this one and drag that up. Oops. There we go. Okay. All right. So now I have one handle for each side. If I go to each one, you can see I have one handle for each side. That's all we really need. I do want a little arc right here, so I'm going to pull that off too. And now I can see, without even having the ball animating, I can see exactly what the ball is going to do. Okay? I may not like the speed that it does it, but I can see the path that it's going to take. So now when I hit play, okay? So that's okay. It looks pretty slow. After it hits, it seems to slow down. Right there. Do you see that slowness? I'm going to just cycle in right here. Oops, B and N right there. So do you see how it slows down right there? Okay. Now obviously that could be a couple things. One of them could be the speed of my keyframes. So if I go into the graph editor, I can adjust the speed of all those keyframes. But what I probably need to do in this case is I probably need to go through that and adjust the spacing between my keyframes. Okay. Now again, you're not going to know all of this right away. Eventually you'll see I need to adjust my keyframes. I've exhausted the graph editor as much as I can. My first stop is always a keyframe. So I'm going to grab these and just squeeze everything a little bit closer together. All right, that feels like a better transition. Okay, and then there's another slow spot right here at the end. Right there. See, that seems a little bit too slow. Looking at the ball, if you look at how far the ball is moving, and we broke it down into how far between each keyframe it should be, we can kind of come up with a logical formula in our head of how this should move. So if you think about it, the less distance the ball moves, the closer those keyframes should be together. Okay? The further the ball moves, the further those keyframes are going to be away from each other, right? So if we look at this, the ball moves the most from here at the start to here where it first hits the wall. So those are obviously further apart. These two keyframes here are pretty far apart. I mean, not as far as the other one, and they're pretty close here. But then this first bump, look how much space is between here and between there. So it feels like we have more distance here than there, so it's going to slow down. It shouldn't slow down. It should slow down, but it shouldn't be slowing down that much. So I'm just going to nudge these in a little bit closer together, like that. And I'm going to nudge these in a little bit closer together. And gradually, as the ball starts to slow down, starts to get to the end of that track, those keyframes are going to get closer and closer and closer. All right? So if we had the ball bounce really high, it starts here and it just goes boing like this, that's a huge distance for the ball to bounce. So we're going to have a lot of time between it. But then if the ball just goes like this, we have short time between it. Okay? Now again, you're not going to know it just by looking at these. I've been looking at keyframes for years. You need to look at this and say what's looking weird, what's looking good. So now when we look at this, that feels a bit better. Okay? Now I don't really like the path that the ball is taking here because it seems like it comes down and then like comes back a little bit. So I'm going to pull this keyframe over. Now as I pull this over, that's actually moving where the ball is going to hit. Okay? So I don't need to move the ball's keyframe. I could move the ball's keyframe here and it'll move all that stuff. So I'm just adjusting where it's hitting and tweaking it from there. So maybe something like that. This can probably come down a little bit more, maybe come a little bit closer. Maybe this one can go down a little bit more, also come a little bit closer. Okay, so I'll watch it again. All right, he also dips below, right? There, that's too low. Use my arrow keys and then he'll bounce back up. That's good, that's good, that's good, okay. And I'm deselecting each time just so I'm not influenced by the graph. I'm just looking at what the ball's doing. All right, so that feels better. The animation actually feels like, number one, the ball is actually hitting the ground, and number two, that it has some sort of gravity or physics that's drawing it, okay? It doesn't feel like the ball is being pushed up or pulled down by some other force besides gravity. It feels like this ball is actually a little bit more realistic looking. Now there's still a spot that I'm not really happy about. It's like right around here. So I'm just gonna, not do that. I'm just gonna grab these and just squeeze those in a little bit further. And squeeze these in a little bit further. And my advice to you is this too, is that if you're not sure, go drastic. Go like more than you think you need to adjust and then pull back, okay? So if I'm not sure of what's working, I can look at that and say, I'm gonna speed this up a lot more than I think I need to speed it up, just so I can see comparatively what it is, what's the difference. Because sometimes you'll look at this and say, maybe this keyframe has to be here. Nope, maybe it has to be here, and it's very difficult to see. But if I just take it and I just like squeeze the whole thing in a lot more and squeeze this whole thing in a lot more, I get a better feel overall for what this is looking like. Okay, and just me again tweaking these even further, I've gotten a pretty decent bouncing ball animation. All right, now I gave myself initially 5 seconds, right? When I made my composition, I said 5 seconds. I started my animation and I got to about 4 seconds or 4:15 with all my keyframes. But now look at how narrow I've shrunk that. I'm at like 2 and 7 keyframes, 2 seconds and 7 keyframes for this animation. And this ball is actually, it's not going relatively quick, okay? This ball is probably lobbed, so someone just probably pulled it back and threw it like that, as opposed to someone throwing the ball like a baseball where it would whip at the wall and then bounce down, okay? So now what I need to do is take my keyframes and I'm gonna go to make them easy ease. I'm gonna go into my graph editor, make sure that's a speed graph, and then go ahead and tweak what these are doing. Now what should happen in here is already kind of happening with our easy ease, okay? Because what's happening is that the ball is here, it's going one speed and it kind of hits its peak and then it starts to slow down a little bit. And that's kind of what the ball would be doing, right? It kind of would be, if I threw a ball way up in the air, it hits a spot where it kind of plateaus and then comes back down. So it's just by putting the easy ease on there, we've kind of gotten it, except for now look at what it's doing. You see how it's slowing down like way too much at the end, okay? It actually is like, whoa, there's a wall coming, and then it stops. We don't want that. So I'm gonna grab the keyframe and just pull it. That way I'm pushing more speed towards the end of the animation than the beginning. Okay, maybe a little bit more. Let's go and pull that up a little bit further. All right, that's maybe too much. Let's go like that. And I'll also set my end of my work area right here. There we go. Okay, and then on each one of these, I'm going to, let me spread this out a little bit. I'm going to spread out my keyframes because this spot here, in the center of it, it actually should be going the slowest. Okay, right now it's going the fastest. So I'm going to spread this out like this and spread this out like that. And what this should give us is pretty quick right after the bounce and right before the bounce. There we go. All right, so that feels a little bit more natural. It feels like as the ball hits the ground, it's going pretty quick, and then it takes off pretty quick. And then as it gets to the height, it's going pretty slow. So like right here, the ball is actually moving pretty slow. All right. These dots that are on here are a good indication too as to the speed of the ball. So just so you can see this a little bit clearer, I'm going to take this and really stretch this out. Okay. So the more bunched up the points are, the slower the ball is going. The less bunched up the points are, the faster it's going. It's basically showing you where the ball is at each frame. So if we watch this now, look at the points before it, really bunched up here and then gradually get more spaced out. We should have something that goes pretty slow and then goes pretty quick. Again, you have to look at it to see, is this looking natural? Right now, for some reason, the ball picks up speed like halfway through. And that's not how it should go. It's weird. So let's go back to this. Let me go back to here. Let me go back to this. Okay, and again, it doesn't hurt anything to try it. You just try it out and see if you're liking what it's looking like. I think that one probably transitions a little bit easier into the next one. Go back to this. I think maybe a little tad bit this way. There we go. That feels a little bit more natural, again, as to how it's moving. Okay. Now I also want to look at the height of these. Like, I'm not sure why this one's higher. It shouldn't be higher. So I'm just going to adjust this. It might just be a glitch or something in the matrix. I just have to squeeze that. It just wants to be higher for some reason. And it could be that the keyframes are too close together right there. Let's see, that's that keyframe there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So if I pull these a little bit further apart, there we go, that seems to even out. Okay, so now that's my keyframes. That's all my keyframes for just this animation, just to get the ball hitting the wall and then doing a couple bounces. All right, so we haven't done anything shockingly different than what we've done before. The only big thing with this one is that we're actually trying to animate something that we already kind of know what it should look like, right? Like if you watch 50 bouncing ball animations, you get the idea what a bouncing ball animation is supposed to be. We've also edited our graph. The only thing different that we've done is we've used the pen tool to tweak the shape of it. That's really the only big thing that we've done. All right, so that's the first part of this animation. So you're going to create 3 little animations like this, and then we're going to create 3 different blippy things that are going to go along with it. So after I get this done, I want to look at it and see what kind of animation do I want on this thing? What do I want to happen? So I think what I want to do is that when it hits the wall, I want to have kind of like a starburst or something kind of fly out from the edges, okay? And the same thing down here. When it hits the ground, I want to have mini little bursts that happen, all right? Little impact hits. So I'm going to make a new composition. I know that this is going to be a circular thing, so it's going to be perfectly square, so I don't need to have a huge resolution here. So I'm going to set it to 512, check that off, by 512. And 5 seconds is plenty of time. I can actually probably go to 3 seconds, and that'll be good. I can always change that later, too. Okay, so I know my idea for this is blippies. I wonder if I can turn this on without ruining everything else. Apparently not. That's on. That's on. Document camera. Aha. There we go. We're apparently locked into something here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and make something. Now I need to turn that off. I need to make a shape. So I'm going to use the pen tool. Where are you at, pen tool? There you are. And I'm going to draw in some guides because I want to get this like locked into the center. So if I go to view, there's show rulers, there's show grid. The grid can be helpful if we adjust it, but I think I just wanted to turn my ruler on. There we go. And then I'm gonna pull across. I know my resolution is 512 by 512. So what's half of 512? 256. All right, and then we go 256 and 256. I'm looking way in the top right where it says guide position. That's what I'm watching to see where 256 is locked into right there. Okay, so that's 256 by 256. I don't need this grid on. It's too much. So now what I'm going to do is lock my guides. There we go. And I'm just going to click a point here, and then I'll just go straight up. Hold down Shift, click a point there. All right, so there's my shape, just this strip of a line. I'm done with my guides for now, so I'm just going to hide my guides. Show guides, there we go. So there's my little strip. So now what I want to do is I want to animate this thing just blipping, just going straight out, that's it. So on here, I'm going to open up my arrow drop down. I'm going to open up my contents, and here's the stuff. Now I could go, just so we can see it, I can go to my transform shape, and I could just go through and animate this scale happening right here. But what I want to do is that blip shape is I want to basically like shoot out and then shoot back in. And we kind of did it last time, but there's a better way to do it, okay? So this really doesn't give me a whole lot of options for doing that exact thing. But there is this little arrow here. See where it says add? And these are other things we can do to shape layers, okay? So think of like a shape layer as something from Illustrator where we can do other effects on top of to get other stuff to happen. So the one I want to use is trim path, okay? And so what trim path does is it puts this other trim path here, and then I get a start and an offset. So right now it's long, so if I change my start, you can see how it just takes that and it trims it. So now it's gone, okay? I can also go to the offset and change this. Now because this is starting here and ending here, the offset is just a big loop of the same line. That's all it is. So there's no difference. If I change this to like 20 and 0, that'll work. And then I went to offset. Okay, now I can get this kind of effect happening on there. So if I was doing a Star Wars movie, let's say, I'm going to turn these guides off just so I can see what my stuff is doing. If I'm doing a Star Wars movie, that could be like a phaser shooting or something, right? All right, so that's what I want to use is something like this. Now the ball is going to be kind of hiding, it a little bit. So I can really start this, a little bit bigger, but I want this to be kind of big. So I'm going to actually keyframe the end and keyframe the offset. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to set my end to 0 and set a keyframe on that and a keyframe on offset. I'm going to go up to, let's say, 10 frames. I'll pull my end up to about 50. That looks good. And then if we look at this, we have that. So now I want to do is basically just have it continue moving and close off and go away. So actually, let's do this. Instead of doing the offset, let's turn that off. I'm going to do the start also. Okay, so it goes here, and then I'm going to turn the start to be on. I'm going to go up to 20, and then I'm going to say, okay, end, you're going to be at 100, and then start, you're going to be at 100 also. Okay, so now watch what happens. It comes out. Okay, there's a little phaser, and then goes away. All right, so what happens between here and here is that the end is also going to the end of it, so that end point, but then the start also comes to the end. All right, so it's basically just scaling those 2 points together. So very easily, I've created this kind of like little blip animation. Okay, now just like everything, we need to go through, click the right buttons. Where's it at? There we go. Make it easy ease. Go into this. Make sure we're on a speed graph, which we are. And then tweak what we have here. Now it's going to be a little bit tricky to get these to line up correctly. And I'm actually going to do this. This one here in the middle, I don't really need that one for end because it's just going from 0 to 100. So that'll just make that a lot easier. There we go. So there's a start, and you see how I can click on the end and just isolate that. I'll pull that up. All right, so now it should go slow to fast. So let's see what happens. There we go. So I think that might be a cool thing when it hits. Now again, I could play with it and see. Do I want to see it that way? Maybe I want to go this way. Maybe I want the speed to happen all at the front of this and not happen at the end. Okay, I think I like where it was hitting before. The cool thing about all of this, if we don't like it, we can come back here and fix it, okay? Now, let's pretend for a second that I did this. Remember what we did last time is I got one to look right and I just duplicated it all the way around? Okay, what happens if I want to come back and change that one? I have to then go through and delete all the ones I have in a circle and fix that one, right? Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer here and I'm going to name it. So I'm going to go to my naming right here. I'm going to call this my blip initial shape. Okay? And I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to do pre-compose. And what this is going to do is it's going to take this one layer and it's basically just going to make it in its own composition. So it's all by itself doing its own thing. Blip initial shape, comp 1, move all my attributes, yes, and hit OK. All right. So now there's no animation in here. If I hit U to go to my keyframes or P or S, if I open this up, there's no trim or anything here. It's just that thing. It's basically a flattened out version of this blip. Okay? But at any point I can double click it and then see all that animation, see all the stuff I've done, tweak the exact blip shape. Okay? So again, this is going to be one of those things where you have to be able to learn how to wrap your brain around how this all works. Okay? Because it's very, it can get very confusing because we have basically like files inside of files, comps inside of comps, and all that. And it is just experience, just playing with it. But now this is basically flattened out. So what I can do is if I took this and I duplicated it and rotated it, let's say 20 degrees, and I duplicate it again, and I rotate it again, 40 degrees, and duplicate it again, and rotate it again, 80, duplicate, oops, someone correct my math, 60. Then 80, that's why I did that, so I don't do that one. And then 100, and then 110, 120, 130, okay? Just so we see what's happening here. It's just rotating that thing, so there we go. Okay. Now, just like I did that one, what I will typically do is that I will take this whole composition and I will pre-compose that, and then that way I can duplicate it and rotate it around to the other side. Because right now we just have half of it, like that. Actually, I missed something. Let me see. 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 110. Yep, see, you guys didn't correct me. This is supposed to be 120. This is 140. This is 160. There we go. All right, so there, and if I duplicate it one more time, 180, there we go, bless you. So there we have half of it, okay? So now I could take this, just so you can see it, I could take this whole thing, right click, pre-compose this, where are you button? There you go. Blip, half, pre-comp. Okay, so now that's pre-composed, I could duplicate that one, rotate it 180, and then you'll see how we get the full circle, okay, without me having to go through and duplicate it and rotate each one individually again. All right. Now, again, that's just preference. That has nothing to do with what how you are working. It's all going to be based on how you feel like you want to work on your stuff. As long as we get good results at the end, I couldn't care less. And it's organized. I couldn't care less. All right. So I could also do this if I just grabbed all these and duplicated them. Move them up so they're all together, then went to rotate, and then just like we did before, just keep rotating this until the last one gets to 360. Oops. Right there. Okay, so that's again another way to accomplish the same thing. Okay, so in a situation like this, I always make a circle. Okay, I always make a circle, and depending on how many divisions I go, like I went 20 degrees, that gives me the more freedom to play with this thing afterwards. Okay, so my comp 1 here, I'm going to rename to full circle blip. Okay, so this is a full circle blip. Like that. All right. Now let's say that I didn't want a full circle. Let's say because my ball is hitting the side of the wall, I only need half of the circle, right? So I can duplicate this composition and rename it to be half circle blip. I'll double click it. And then all I have to do here, there we go, is just hide all the ones I don't want. There we go. So now I have a half circle. Okay? Now let's say I didn't like that many rays on it. So I can take my half circle and duplicate it, rename it. I'll call this half circle, I'm going to call it 45, even though we don't have a 45-degree angle. I'm going to double click it. And then I can just turn off every other one. Okay? So now I'm maximizing that one shape, one animation, just that little blip shape. That's all that's animated. Everything else is just duplicating it. And if I don't want to see all these other ones, because obviously seeing all of these other things in here that aren't doing anything is kind of a pain. So I'm going to grab all of these, and there's a little guy. If you were to zoom in or you had a really old computer, there's a little guy right here, and he is shy. And so we click on him because he's shy, and he goes and he hides. And then we can click on this one, click on this one, click on that one, click on that one. So all of those indicate shying a layer. Basically, I don't want to see that layer, but I want to keep it. I don't want to delete it. Now I activate the shy guy by clicking this. There we go. So now I'm only seeing the layers that apply to what I'm doing inside here. All right, so now I have these 5 layers, and then I could just go through and maybe offset them a little bit, like that, and then like that. There we go. Okay, so now I've again changed how this whole thing is behaving. Now I could also just go back to that initial shape. So here's my initial shape, right there. Let's say it goes too slow. I grab this and pull it in, grab these and pull it in. And now that initial shape goes to this. So now this is going to go quicker. And then if I go to this, that's going to go quicker. Okay? So that one shape is controlling all this other stuff. And then just like we talked about before, let's say I wanted to go to adjust my coloring. So I can make an adjustment layer inside here, go to my color correction, go to hue and saturation. Let me make sure I can see it. There it is. And I could play with the hue of it. Okay? As this is white, there is no hue adjustment because I have to take my lightness down or colorize, and then take my lightness down, and then adjust my hue. There we go. We can kind of see it right there. Cool. All right, so now I've just made a yellow version of this. Or if I wanted a blue version, I could take this and just cycle this over to the blue area. Okay? If I need my lines thicker, I go back to my initial shape. I wait till it's on, I click on it, and then I make my thickness bigger. Okay, go back to my half circle 45, and you can see how all that translates into this one. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do with this. It's just a matter of playing and playing and playing with it to get those results. That's too thick. I'm going to go back to this. That's 11. Let's go to 5. Yeah, that 5 feels good. Go here. Now I could have also gone back to my original shape and adjusted my color on there too. And what I can also do is just adjust my color once I get it into there. Okay. So now that I have my blip shape, I have several blip shapes. Let me take the stroke off the ball. I don't want it like that. There we go. All right. I'm going to take my half circle 45 because I like that one the best, and I'm going to drop it inside here. Now, if you look how big that composition is. You see, we only need this much of that composition because that's our animation, but we're seeing the rest of this. So I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to go back to my half circle 45, and I'm going to trim this to get just what I need, right about there. So I'm going to hit N to get the end of my work area. I'm going to go to composition and say trim comp, and now it fits it perfectly. Okay, so now if I go back to my bouncing ball, I re-drop this in, I'll see exactly, here's how long that bouncing ball or that blip is at. So when I come in here and I say, okay, I want this to be right there, I can say, okay, let's set it right here, and then I can just move this over to this side, and I'll probably have to rotate it. Let's see, like that. There we go. Okay, so now it's gonna hit. Okay. And I can also scale it up too. So even though it's, you know, was brought in at one scale, I could always make it bigger. There we go. I could also change the speed. So if I go to toggle switches and modes, which we saw last time, not toggle switches and modes. It is toggle switches and mode, but I also have to click on this here, okay? This little expand or collapse thing, there's actually a stretch on it. So I could actually stretch my animation to, let's say, 50%. So now those blips are gonna happen a lot quicker. Okay, so now it's happening a lot quicker over there. That's probably too much. So oops. Try that again. There we go. Okay, and maybe I also want to put these underneath. I don't like them really happening on top. There we go. Okay, maybe I'll rotate it a little bit further. I think having it rotated like that might give it more of an effect. Nope, I think I rotated the other way. Like that. And I'm not even satisfied with this one coming up. See, I don't like that guy coming up, so I'm gonna just go back to my half circle, and that's the first one. So I'm just gonna hide the first one. Maybe I'll bring back some of these other ones, and then I'll choose which ones I want. That's too much maybe there. Alright, so maybe something like that. So let me grab these ones and add them to the shy list. And these ones, let me take them off the shy list. There we go. And then I just offset these just randomly, just kind of spreading them out a little bit just so they're all not on top of each other. Okay, and I don't like the one at the very end, so let me push him further, right there. There we go. So that feels a little bit better. So I jump back to the bouncing ball. There we go. And I'll rotate it like that. Okay, so now again, it's something that's kind of modular where I can continuously play with this until I'm happy with how those results are looking. Once I have this, then I can duplicate this shape. I can go to where the ball is bouncing, right here. Move it down here, rotate it up so I can see it. Like that. So it's kind of going in the same direction as it. I'm going to take the scale down to maybe 100. And I'll push it forward a little bit. Okay, so again, this is adding a little bit more life into this animation, which would have been just pretty boring otherwise. And all I'm going to do now is just duplicate it, go to the next bounce right here, scoot it over to the next bounce, scoot it over here, duplicate it, scoot it over to the next bounce, scoot it over to where the next bounce is happening, go to the next bounce, duplicate it, scoot it down, scoot it down. Okay, and then just to give it some variation, I can just rotate these kind of randomly. Just maybe it's a little bit further here, a little bit further there. Maybe the size of this one is a little bit smaller, and then the size of this one, because it's the last one, is even smaller than that. Okay, and then this last one probably needs to come down further too. Not you, you. There we go. And then this one will probably scoot down a bit too. I double clicked, go back to that. Yeah, this one could probably, because it's hitting the ground here, I should probably move this so it's hitting the ground there, and this one so it's hitting the ground there. And this one so it's hitting the ground there. You eyeball it. I mean, I could go into this and adjust my position to get to be. So this is 1920 by 1080. So if I put this 1080, no, we just move it. I think there is snapping. Like if I hold control, it's going to snap to other objects. And if I go under view, there is a snap inside here somewhere. But I typically just eyeball it. Nothing that needs to be lined up perfectly. Okay. Now there's other stuff that I could have done too. Like I could have had, as the ball's coming into this, like Matrix style, I could have had like little rays kind of popping out of it too when it hits. I could have done the little blip circles around the ball too as it hits the side. Okay. I could also go into each one of these and just add a color correction as well if I needed to adjust the color on any one of these. Tint. I'll try tint on this one. And that's this one. Try to pick the smallest one. And map white to which color? Yellow. There we go. So now I have this greeny yellow color. Maybe I'll leave it the red. There we go. So now let's see pieces of the ball maybe are breaking off. Okay. And I can copy that tint, grab the other half circles, and then just paste it on them. And now they should all have that same thing, unless I missed one. Okay. I could also do things like glow. So if I go to my effects and I go to generate, stylize, that's where it's at, and go to glow here. I could actually add a glow to this, pull the intensity up, pull the glow radius up. Again, we don't want to do stuff just to do it. If it enhances it, yes. If not, then no, we pull it off. Okay? But just to show you that it's not just like we do this one thing and we never touch it again, we can constantly come back and tweak it. I'm going to pull that down, though. I think that coloring on that is just too much. Let's just pull this back up to 100 and adjust this. Yellow. I forgot one. One thing I wish After Effects had was an easy way to pick colors. Like in some programs, you click on this and you would have swatches right here. They don't have that. All right. Okay, so you can play with that trim path and get other things. So you can do little blobby circles. You can do little sprayers like this. You can do a bunch of other effects as well. If I jump back and make a new comp real quick, 512 is perfect. Oops, I want to double click. There we go. Go back to add. And then even inside here, even though this is a circle, I can still use trim path on it. Oops, wrong one. And you can see how I can wipe that circle onto the screen there. Or if I were to just draw a, leave that shape there, turn the fill to none, turn the stroke on, and resize it. Transform ellipse, scale. There we go. And here's our trim path. So this was one of the things that we saw in some of the examples where they would do like kind of like that wipe around there. So we could actually animate this kind of thing happening. I'll just go to 0 here and set a keyframe, go up a smidge, set this to 100. And then maybe at that same time, I'll set my start keyframe and then set that to 100. So what we should get now is this loop, like that. Okay, kind of like your loading bar on your phone. Okay, so once I have that, I could take this shape and duplicate it, and then go to the contents, go to my ellipse path, and then change the size. So now I'm shrinking that ellipse path down. Duplicate it again, go back to that ellipse size, here, 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 and scale that down. Maybe I'll change the width on this also, like 20. Okay, so now we get this. And then if we're a little bit clever about it, we can just offset these. Right? So now we're getting these really neat patterns just by doing the same trim path but on different shapes. And I'm using circle, I use line that I drew with the pen tool. It's anything. Any shape that you draw in After Effects, you can do that with. If I go into my pen tool and I just drew some crazy shape here, wonderful. I add a stroke to it. What? See, it was so crazy, After Effects just said forget it. Let me hide these so I don't accidentally click on one of those. All right, so something like this. There we go. Add a stroke to it. There we go. And then we can add that trim path also from up here. And we could animate this thing kind of trimming on or whatever. Now this trim path is a great tool because further down the line we can actually use it to write stuff. Okay, you ever seen those things where it looks like someone's writing something? That's what they use trim path for. Because they're using trim path as actually like visibility. Like I want to see the stuff. It reveals that layer. It's pretty neat. And then there's other stuff too. Again, we don't use them just because they're there. We use them because they enhance what we're doing. So there's a wiggle path, which now if you look at it is a wiggly path that actually like wiggles around. Okay. Again, we use it just when it's necessary to enhance our stuff. There's also offset path where we're taking this and offsetting it. So if I look, now I have like, instead of just like the one path going through, I have two paths going around. And all these work together. So if I were to go to my trim path, you see how it's trimming that offsetted path. Okay. So crazy stuff that we could do. This is kind of a neat thing here, especially if you added different colors and different thicknesses to each one of those lines, you can create some very interesting things. Now my animation was the ball bouncing and hitting the wall and doing that. You don't have to do that. I want you animating something into your scene and adding some sort of effect to it.